Think about what happens when you have 50 browser tabs open at the same time, with music playing in one, a video auto playing in another, and pop-ups firing everywhere. Nothing is technically broken, but your brain immediately wants to shut down. And that's what a lot of homes feel like. Too many things demanding attention all at once, with no clear order or priority. But good design is what decides which tabs stay open, which ones run quietly in the background, and which ones need to be closed entirely. So in this video, I'll teach you the 4 design rules that bring order to the chaos, so your home finally feels calm, clear, and easy to live in. So this first rule is something a lot of homes quietly struggle with, which is using a cohesive color flow throughout their space. But the truth is, a well-designed home usually has some kind of unified color palette that guides you from room to room. Now, that doesn't mean every wall is painted the same color or that the home is all matchy-matchy. It means the colors complement each other and repeat in thoughtful ways. Because when your entryway, living room, kitchen, and hallways all share a common color palette, the whole home feels connected. Nothing feels jarring or out of place, and each room transitions smoothly into the next. Now, the contrary to this would be if each room was designed in isolation. A blue living room, a red kitchen, a green bedroom that have no shared hues, then walking through your home would feel choppy. 2 individual rooms might be nice on their own, but together they'll clash. And that gives you this abrupt sense of change when you move from room to room, almost like the rooms are arguing with each other. And this disjointed feeling is the result of having no color flow. The home lacks a cohesive visual story, and it often leaves you feeling unsettled. But imagine those same rooms with a cohesive palette. So maybe the living room is mostly blue and white, the kitchen picks up that white and adds in some soft gray, and the bedroom introduces gray-blue accents against some neutral walls. Now, each room has its own personality, but a bit of blue or gray shows up in all of them, which quietly ties everything together. And so the result is a home that feels so much better because your eye isn't resetting every time you enter a new room. And instead of a patchwork of separate zones, it feels like different chapters of the same story. And this is the power of a cohesive color flow. It makes your home feel designed as a whole rather than like it's the product of a series of random decisions. So if your home feels chaotic or just kind of off as you walk through it, step back and look at the colors. And ask yourself, do my rooms speak the same language, or is each room speaking in a different tongue? Because if it's the latter, that's a clear sign you need to dial in your colors. But this doesn't need to be super complex, so really don't overthink this. For example, if you've got a bright yellow kitchen, which I wouldn't recommend, but maybe you do, it doesn't mean you have to have a bright yellow living room as well. Instead, bring the same shade of yellow into the living room through a cushion or an art piece, and that's enough. And if you do that throughout your home, weaving the colors together from room to room, your entire space will feel a lot more harmonious. Now, having a cohesive color palette brings your rooms closer together, but what gives each room its unique identity is focus. Because even when everything looks nice, a space with no clear focus still feels unsettled. And that's because your eye needs somewhere to land, or some kind of reason to pause. And that's where focal points come in. So the thinking behind focal points is that in every room, there should be one element quietly leading the way. Maybe it's a fireplace, a piece of art, or a window that draws you toward the light. Whatever it is, that focal point gives the room a sense of order, and then everything else should be supporting that focal point. But most people don't create focal points on purpose. They let them happen by accident. The TV might become the focal point of the living room just because it's big. Or you might think your bright orange chair is the focal point because it's bold and sitting in the wrong spot. But that's not design. That's leaving your room's story up to chance. So don't do that. Instead, here's the right way to choose a focal point of a room. First, ask what the room is for. You want your focal point to match the main job of the room. And so that means in your bedroom, the focal point will usually be the bed. In your dining room, it'll usually be the dining table. And in your living room, it's what people naturally gather around. So that might be a fireplace, or it could be a picture window, or the TV, or a particularly comfy sofa. There are different options here because different people use their living rooms in different ways, so it's up to you to decide what the focal point of your living room is. But remember, if the focal point doesn't match how the room is used, things will never feel quite right. But what if the focal point of the room isn't obvious, even once you've identified what your room is for? In that case, the next thing to do is stand in the doorway and notice what your eye goes to first, without thinking. Pull usually comes from size, contrast, or light. So a big window, a fireplace, a bed, it's probably going to be something like that. So just observe and see what draws your attention in the room. And once you know what job the room is performing and what your eye is drawn to, identify the focal point that makes the most sense. And here's a quick check you can run through if you're still not sure. Ask yourself, if I could only keep one thing in this room, what would it be? More often than not, that's your focal point. Once you've identified the focal point of the room, you want to think of the other elements in the room as supporting actors positioning themselves around the star. So for example, if the focal point of your living room is the fireplace, then the sofa can be oriented to face that fireplace, which subtly tells everyone that's where to look. Or a pair of lamps on nightstands can frame your bed. And even negative space can act as a frame, because when you leave an area around the focal point a bit emptier, that's going to draw the eye there because there's nothing else competing. And when you do this well, your room becomes so easy to understand. You walk into the dining room and you immediately know that the big farmhouse table under the chandelier is the centerpiece of the room, so the room feels right. Or you step into the bathroom and the eye goes straight to the vanity, which makes the space feel deliberately designed. And that's what strong focal points do. But when you ignore focal points or everything is given equal weight, that's when the opposite happens. Your eye starts ping-ponging around the room. The bright rug, then the big sofa, then the bold wall art, all of these things at once. And you're not really sure what to look at, and the room just feels unsettled and busy as a result. So if you have a room in your home that feels a bit confusing, there's a good chance it's because you haven't identified a clear focal point. Now, once a room has something leading it, the way you move around the room becomes just as important, because a space isn't just meant to be looked at, it's meant to be lived in. Now, a lot of people arrange their rooms based on a single angle, like the perfect photo or the view from the couch, but real rooms are experienced in motion. You enter the room, walk around, sit down, get up, and leave. And good design anticipates those movements and makes them feel natural, because when a space has great flow, you almost don't notice it. You can glide from the kitchen to the living room or from the bed to the closet without any awkwardness. But when a space has poor flow, you feel it immediately in your body, even if you can't quite put your finger on why. So think about a hallway for a second. If everything fits in the hallway, there's no problem. But if a console table in the hallway juts out just a bit too much, you'll instinctively turn your shoulder every time you pass, and that's a flow problem. Or think about a bedroom where the bed is so large and the furniture is so packed in that you have to squeeze past the bed to get to the other side. Over time, that room will subconsciously stress you out because moving through it is a hassle. You might even avoid using certain parts of the room altogether because the path feels inconvenient or blocked. So that sort of flow issue doesn't show up that clearly in a static photograph of the room, but it absolutely shows up in daily life. So good flow isn't something you hope happens, it's something you design on purpose. And it starts with deciding where people should walk and how they should circulate, and then arranging furniture to either guide that movement or just stay out of its way. And sometimes creating good flow means removing or relocating pieces that interrupt natural pathways. Now, one super common mistake people make is pushing all the furniture against the walls, thinking it'll make the room feel bigger. But in reality, that often backfires because you end up with the center of the room being empty but useless, and all the functional stuff is crammed to the edges. And so the room actually feels more closed off because you haven't left any inviting route through it. You've just created a big donut of empty space in the middle. So instead, you want to think of creating gentle, obvious pathways. So in a living room, that might mean placing the sofa and chairs in a way that leaves a clear route between the front door and the rest of the home. A path that flows naturally around the seating area, not straight through the middle of it. And in a kitchen, it normally means keeping the work triangle of the sink, stove, and fridge clear of obstructions so two people can cook without constantly bumping into each other. And even in a tiny studio, it means arranging your furniture so you can move easily between zones, from the bed to the sofa, or from the kitchen to the front door, without squeezing through tight corners or dodging table edges. Because when flow is handled right, the space feels effortless. You don't have to think about moving through it, you just move. And that ease translates into comfort and a home that actually works. So here's a quick test. Walk through each room in your home and pay attention to how it feels. Are you sidestepping furniture, turning sideways at any point, or detouring around awkward layouts? If yes, you've got a flow issue. And it's up to you to rearrange things until the paths through your rooms feel obvious and unobstructed. A beautiful chair might look great in that corner, but if it's constantly in your way, it's not in the right spot. Because design isn't just about how a room looks, it's about how it lives. And a home that's easy to move through is a home that you'll love to spend time in. Now, rule number 4 is one that a lot of people forget about because they don't notice it while the sun's up. But once the sun goes down and the light changes, it becomes the most important thing in the room. Because even the best designed room will fall flat if the lighting isn't right. And that's why you need to layer your light. Because a common mistake so many people make is relying on a single overhead light to illuminate their entire room. But we all know the feeling of walking into a room with just one harsh ceiling light blasting everything, right? It makes a beautifully decorated space feel flat and clinical. But on the other hand, walking into a space with a soft mix of overhead glow, warm side lighting, and subtle floor level accents almost feels cinematic. The room draws you in without effort. It's calm, layered, and full of warmth because the lighting isn't just there to brighten the space, it's also shaping the atmosphere. But what does layered lighting even mean? Layered lighting just means having multiple different light sources at multiple different levels, and each type of light has a different job. Ambient light is what generally illuminates the room, so it's the overhead or ceiling lights that fill most of the space. Task lighting is more focused, so you can think of under cabinet lights in the kitchen for chopping veggies, or a desk lamp in your home office. And then accent lighting is for mood and highlighting specific objects, like a picture light above a framed piece of art, or the soft glow of a nightlight in a hallway. And when you start combining these different layers of light, you have so much control over the atmosphere of a room. For example, in a bathroom, you might have bright overhead lights for your morning routine, but also softer wall sconces around the mirror, and some under cabinet lights for a relaxing evening bath. And in the kitchen, you'll have ceiling lights for cooking, but also pendant lights or under cabinet LEDs to add a bit of warmth and eliminate shadows on the counters. Now, if you're not sure how to actually add lighting into your space, or what kind of lighting makes the biggest difference, let's look at a couple of real rooms before and after layering the light so you can clearly see the difference. So in this first example, virtually all of the light in the room is coming from this hanging pendant light in the corner. Now, of course, they do have overhead lighting as well, but it's switched off right now, probably because it's way too bright and harsh for the evening. So to compensate, they're using the pendant light in the corner, which is better, but it's still a really harsh glow from that corner of the room, and the rest of the room is dark. So this is not a good setup. But once you layer in the lighting, everything changes. First, there are a few lamps dotted around the room at different levels. So table lamps on the console and next to the front door, and a floor lamp behind the couch. So now, because the light is coming from so many different places, the room is more evenly lit without relying on one super bright light in the corner. Plus, you'll notice that the light is much more yellow now instead of white, which is a lot easier on the eyes in the evenings. And the same thing goes in this second living room. Before, the room is being lit by a single lamp off to the side, with the TV and hall light filling in some of the gaps, but the space doesn't feel inviting at all. But now notice how it looks after we tweak the lighting. The two picture lights above the TV cast a soft glow on the wall, the lamp on the console on the left side of the room balances out the floor lamp on the right side, and the warmer, more yellow bulbs make the room a whole lot more cozy. So the space feels warmer and a lot more comfortable without changing the layout at all. And I could show you dozens of other lighting setups, but I think you probably get the point. Proper lighting makes a massive difference in how your home feels. The tricky part is, most people either stop with a single overhead fixture, or they add in random lamps without thinking about the underlying properties of good lighting, like balance and positioning. So even after they upgrade their lighting, the room still feels a little off. And that's exactly why I put together the scale framework, which is a system that helps you understand lighting on a fundamental level. It tells you what kind of lighting you need to add to your space, where to position it, and how to create that warm, cozy atmosphere without relying on guesswork. I won't go into all the details here, but the two rooms you just saw where I upgraded the lighting, those upgraded images were created by uploading the before images into the tool I built based on the scale framework and a bunch of other interior design best practices. So if you want to try out the tool and upload your own images to see how changing your lighting would transform your own home, there's a link in the description. But why do these rules matter so much? Because good design isn't about having a perfect eye or a big budget. It's about learning to pay attention. And once you do, you start to notice when a room feels disjointed because the colors don't connect. You recognize when it feels noisy because nothing's leading the eye. You feel when the layout is awkward, not because it's messy, but because it fights the way you move. And you start seeing how much lighting changes the entire mood of a space. And that shift in awareness changes everything, because now you're not just reacting to how a space feels, you're understanding why it feels that way. You're not guessing, you're seeing. And once you can see what's really going on in a room, fixing it becomes so much easier. So if your room has felt off, you don't need more stuff, you just need a better starting point. And that's exactly what these 4 rules give you: a clear, thoughtful way to make your home feel right piece by piece. So if there's one takeaway here, it's that good design isn't about copying what looks good online. It's about understanding why things work. And once you start thinking this way, everything becomes so much clearer. So if you want to dive deeper into the scale framework I mentioned earlier, which will give you a deep understanding of lighting so you know exactly what needs to change to make your home feel like a boutique hotel, watch this video next. I'll see you there.